Every day, we are learning more about our changing world. Every day, ideas are born, challenges become opportunities. To achieve our purpose, we need people who can turn ideas into reality, who can create success. That's us at ABB. Thinkers, engineers, scientists, innovators. We push the boundaries of technology to make industry safer, more intelligent, and more productive.
Good afternoon. I'm really delighted to welcome you to this keynote interview with two wonderful speakers, Andrew Cole, CEO of OzMinerals, and Jan Kwak, Head of Australia Asia Pacific for Hatch. The topic we'll explore today for IMARC Online is mining and the SDGs, your top 3 sustainability priorities into 2021. I'm Wendy Tyrrell. I'm Exec Director of the Development Partner Institute. We're an organisation with a very clear vision for the future of the mining sector as an industry that's deeply connected to the values of tomorrow's generation, transparent and fair, equal and inclusive, and a genuine partner in global development. The SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, are a set of 17 universal goals that have the backing of the United Nations and world leaders. And the 17 goals are referred to as the blueprint for sustainability for all. Crucially, when the SDGs were launched in 2015, it was recognised that the private sector would be instrumental in achieving the 2030 goals. Now there's less than 10 years to go, so there's a growing urgency. At the same time, we're seeing very clear emerging evidence that companies which focus on broader sustainability goals are achieving stronger financial performance than those who do not. Mining, of course, has a very unique opportunity to contribute to sustainability as businesses that operate around the world, often in rural and remote regions, right in the heart of communities. I see the sector as one that's seeking to create an ethos where economic and social progress is at the centre. So we're delighted to see progressive mining companies and suppliers of goods and services to the sector recognising the value of the SDGs as a framework for sustainability. It's not about gloss though. These are often not easy challenges. So this is about moving from the glossy to the gutsy. Today we're going to take you right to the heart of sustainability with two leaders who are passionate about it, Andrew and Jan. So I'm going to start by asking you both, Andrew first and then Jan, in the context of the SDGs, what brings you here? What is it about your passion that leads you to be part of this conversation about mining and the SDGs? So Andrew.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wendy, and thanks for the opportunity to contribute to a topic like this. This is something that's really close to my heart. I personally believe that we need to change the way we conduct business. We all need to be striving towards a higher purpose, if you like, something that betters society and the planet, not just generate profits that perhaps has historically been the core driver, our business, if you like, historically. The SDGs certainly resonate with me, and they certainly resonate with us at OzMinerals. They help us target, they help us measure, they help us keep track of things that we can do to improve society, and they also provide us a measure to hold us to account. And I think organisations need to be held to account. They very much align to our purpose, which we established a few years ago, and that is to go beyond what's possible to make lives better. They also align to the way that we think about value. So value historically for organisations has been measured in NPV terms, usually. For us, though, we now equally define value as the value we create for our shareholders, employees, communities, governments, and suppliers. And we've systematized that. So these SDGs, I would say, are now systematized through the way that we actually undertake business in OzMinerals. So It's certainly very personal to me. It's personal to the company, and we use the SDG framework in the way that we think and the way we report.
Love that. Purpose, values. Jan.
Okay, I'll answer a slightly different way. First of all, thanks to the IMARC people and to you, Wendy, for hosting this. Always exciting events, and I'm really happy that we're plowing through this, even though we're a bit more virtual than we like to be. It's really important that we keep this kind of stuff going. You know, maybe I'll take more personal dimension to this. In our kind of business, I've had a chance to work in all corners of the world and visit a lot of mines, get involved in construction of a lot of mines, and involved in operation. And I remember a couple of mines that I've seen over the years, a couple of smelters I've visited in Indonesia and in Asia, where you just ask yourself, how can this be? How can a Western company operate a mine that operates like this? I visited construction sites in Myanmar, you know, during some difficult years in Myanmar, and you saw the kind of social impact that mines have. We've been involved here at Hatch at the closure for ERA in Gove, and seeing the kind of impact that mines have on communities and how difficult it is to close places. Another one very close to my heart was I got a chance to work on the Cliffs Chromite project in northern Canada, where it was the first time in my career I got to see firsthand, you know, what those Indigenous communities in that case were dealing with, and how far removed sometimes these people from big cities far away, how foreign that would be to the people that live in a local community. And you know, you look at that, and then you come back home and you hear your kids talking about how mining is not for the future and it's a dirty industry. And then what really hit the nail on the head for me actually was last year's IMARC. Last year's IMARC, there were protests outside the building. And I remember just being a little bit dazed, like, what's going on here? We're on the same side, but we don't seem to be able to talk about that. You know, the people that were outside the building, they had a point, and it's great, but there was no way to convey how every single person that I work with in the mining industry wants nothing more than the same things they do: social justice, social value, environmental value generation. So, you know, that last event kind of just made me double down, the kind of personality I am. I doubled down on how important this is for the mining industry to find a better way and find a way that it's understood what we're doing and make it even better. You know, Andrew talked about value generation. The mining is important for society to function, and we have to generate social value, environmental value, and financial value all simultaneously. So these kind of events have been some of the markers in my 10, 20 years of career that have just made me passionate about creating the broader value out of mining, so that it can play the role it's supposed to in society.
Thanks, Jan. I love that too. The passion that you both have really shines through for sustainability. So then moving on with a couple of brief examples, could you give us a window into how you think about and talk about the SDGs, and particularly what your priorities are?
Me?
Yeah. Do you want to start, Jan, and then Andrew?
Okay, fine, sure.
I'll flip it around.
Yeah, with pleasure. First of all, like most companies, the SDGs and sustainable development are big topics. It would be very unusual to find someone in our industry today that didn't understand and wasn't passionate in some way about this. But when you look at the actual SDGs, this is a view from the inside. They're very idealistic, and there's some that are clear, that we know what to do, and there's some that are very unclear, and it's not obvious what needs to be done. The ones that are to do with technical topics, the ones that are to do that there's an obvious business case behind it, those things happen, and we can dig our teeth into those quickly, and we do. The ones that involve restructuring supply chains, restructuring how global finance happens, the ones that involve restructuring the ecosystem that supports industries are difficult. And quite frankly, although we can speak in idealistic terms how it should be structured, it's difficult to know how we can have an impact. So what we do is we focus on what we can have an impact on. And an example is a copper project we're working on in Indonesia right now, where we're lucky. We're right at the beginning of a study where you still have a lot of runway in front of you to make a difference. we decided to go in head first and say, well, these things are important here. Shared value is important, land use is important, carbon footprint is important, and residual social value, meaning that the local communities have a way to generate value even after the mine is closed. Those are things that we've kind of figured out how to cook that into the scope of a project and into a development and play it out through the construction, operation, and closure phases. So we set ourselves up with a framework. How do you measure that, and how do you incorporate that kind of thinking into each stage of the project development? And it works. It's something that wouldn't have been done 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but although the tools were there, it required an SDG framework like we have now to kind of put the importance on it and allow us to move forward.
Thanks, Jan. That's a fantastic example, your project in Indonesia. Andrew.
That's a really good example, Jan. Look, I'm going to take a slightly different tact. Rather than try and prioritise the SDGs, which I think is incredibly difficult because you're left facing moral dilemmas almost about which one's more important at what pace. So it's about trying to focus on them all in a way, but pull the right levers at the right pace when you get opportunities and create opportunities to do so. Let me pick two examples that we're working on. One is about value-adding creating value-adding products. So this is about generating clean product right through the supply chain. And we recognize that the resources sector and mining companies historically have had a fairly material impact on our planet, whether it's environmental impact or emissions impact, and many other impacts. And I think we are moving. I think the resource sector is actually moving. I also think we've got a long way to go. I believe we can get to a net neutral impact position. And I'd argue in many of these areas, I think we can get to a net positive impact area, in these domains. And I think that's the challenge for us. We have work programs underway to do that at the moment. So if I use one example at our West Musgrave mine, it's a new mine we're designing. It's probably only a year away from a construction decision. We have purposefully taken the position that this is going to be an emission-free operation. And that requires an awful lot of thinking to actually technically make that work. I would say we're not quite there yet, but you really have to start from the bottom up and redesign everything, because the old way of thinking about mining doesn't actually work, and it becomes too expensive to create an emissions-free mining operation. So I think it's really exciting, but it's also really hard, and you need the input and collaboration with many, many different parties to make it happen. A second example I'd use is that, and that is with people, and specifically I'm going to talk about land-connected people. Let me use the example at Carrapateena. So we've finished building Carrapateena, a new copper gold mine, just under a year ago now. And we chose from the very outset, some 5 years ago, when we very first met with the local traditional owners, the Kukata people, about this new construction, we said to them on day one that if we can't find a pathway that you will approve and support us on, we will not build this mine. And that was a really difficult thing for people to get their heads around, that we were going to hand over approval of a brand new mine to land connected people who didn't know very much about us or the operating environment. We then spent the next 3 years effectively with that community earning their trust and then ours. We walked every inch of that project. We moved pieces of infrastructure so that the people endorsed where we put our footprint. So we minimized disturbance on the land and protected their heritage. What that enabled us to do is to submit a mining lease application, which the traditional owners actually endorsed and wrote a letter of support for. And I think that's an example where we put trust in the land connected people, the traditional owners in this case, to support us in a new mine development. And I think it worked really, really well. And we're now doing exactly the same thing on our new project at West Musgrave, where we're working with the Nunandara people. And I think if you treat people with trust and respect, they will reciprocate. And if you treat them with distrust and disrespect, they will also reciprocate. So I think this is an area that we've got a lot of work to do, but we're also seeing lots of green shoots around different parts of the sector where people are really trying to make a go of this.
Fantastic examples with West Musgrave, with Carrapateena, with Jan's example in Indonesia. And there's a theme here, isn't there? It's about building sustainability into the design right from the very beginning, and putting people at the heart of thinking and planning and design. There's a wonderful positivity that we're seeing in mapping SDGs against sustainability in mining. There's also been some criticism, and I want to talk about that with you. Criticism that they're a colourful addition to sustainability reports and that there are deeper issues to be resolved. Also that the private sector doesn't always talk about the negative impacts that it has on the achievements of the SDGs. What do you make of that? And how do we go beyond the glossy to the gutsy? So perhaps Andrew and then Jan.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. Look, a really good question. I would suggest that currently our sector, and probably the planet in a way, not just our sector, but multiple sectors, are in a transition zone where we have treated goals like the SDGs as a scorecard that's an output from the way we undertake business. And we score ourselves, we report against those metrics, and we put it in our reports. I would argue that that alone is not going to create the change that's actually needed, that we need to see. You've actually got to take these SDGs and internalize them to understand, what do you need to change in your system? What do you need to change in your culture? What do you need to change in your leadership principles, your behaviors, to actually create those outcomes? Because simply having an administrative report card at the end, which I do think some have actually used or produced in the past, is not going to get us anywhere near to where we actually need to be. So you need to start at the top, and the tone has got to come from the top. It's got to be a multi-sectorial approach, the resources sector included. And I think it's got to move from a compliance and accusations of non-compliance to that of a greater purpose. So the more that we can encourage organisations, private and public, to move towards for purpose, for the greater good of society, and as you said, Wendy, about people, because ultimately that's what it's all about. I think that is what's actually going to generate the change. Short-term profits at the expense of overarching purpose will result in long-term value destruction for everybody. So whilst you might get short-term profits out of using this as a scorecard, it will destroy value over the long term. And I do worry that our markets are getting shorter and shorter term focused on this. So we need to be very careful in this space.
Thanks. What a great response. Thank you. Jan.
Well, Andrew, spot on. In fact, just to elaborate for a moment on your thing there, you're right. When people put up traffic light reports on this kind of thing, I shudder as well, because it's all rearward looking, and it doesn't really drive us towards long-term thinking. I think it's true, Wendy, back in your question, some companies do treat this as window dressing and a chance to put out a glossy report. The mining industry is a big industry, and there's a subset that do that. I know that, but there's also a subset that takes this very, very seriously, and I think those people are showing vision, leadership. There's a couple of gaps. As kind of coming back to what we were talking about earlier, there's the aspirational end of the SDGs, and there's what do you actually do? How do you engineer that? How do you operate like that? And in order to address those gaps, in my mind, there's a couple of, we have to reverse our thinking or change our thinking. The way I put that is, switching from seeing SDGs or social value as a cost center to a benefit center. I saw that many times through the different mines I've visited. And, you can't just imagine that you can buy social license. You just go build a school, or you build a hospital, or you do something for the community, and then you've spent the money, so they should be happy. Similarly for the environment, you can't just treat it as a dollar. The currency of social value and environmental value is not necessarily dollars. Dollars are involved, but not that way. We got to figure out how to look at all of these things as benefits and value centers in the way we construct our businesses. Second big gap is the way we think about risks versus opportunities. I think just through the way the industry has been structured for all of our careers, and then a lot longer before that, we tend to take a risk-based approach to everything we do. We think of a project, we write down as long a list as possible of the risks, and then we start mitigating the risks. Now that just the mindset that's required in order to draw up a risk mitigation plan is not the framework for opportunities and developing new things and thinking about things in new ways. It's risk has a place, risk analysis has a place, but it can't dominate the thinking about how we drive the mining industry and how we drive projects and operation and closures. The next one, I've got 4 here. Number 3 is
we've got 1 minute.
1 minute.
left.
Okay, really quickly. We cannot have an SDG department. We have to all own this topic. You don't outsource this. Just like we don't outsource safety to the safety department, we don't outsource this to the SDG department. And lastly, you got to measure this stuff. You got to turn it from a goal to a specific objective for a project.
Fantastic. Thank you. It's such an honor to speak with you, Andrew and Jan. Thank you for your leadership, and thanks very much to IMARC Online. I'm sure that if you want to learn more about the work at Oz Minerals and Hatch, that Jan and Andrew would be very willing to speak with you further. And likewise, if you want to learn more about the Development Partner Institute, I'd be delighted to share that. So thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, Jan, and thanks so much to IMARC Online.
Pleasure. Great discussion. Thanks.
Thank you
very much, Wendy.